Announcement before we start. There's a meal list in the back for the preachers. If you'd like to have a preacher for a meal, starting Wednesday through Sunday, sign up if you want in the back.
All right. We're back in the book of Revelation, and we're in chapter 3. Remember kind of the little bit of the outline that we're looking at here. And the button's not wanting to work for some reason. Oh. Now I know why. There we go. Okay. So, the beginning of the book, remember the context of the book tells us that Christians are facing a difficult, challenging situation from a lot of different sides that we're seeing. The main theme through the book is that they're facing persecution. They're suffering because they're trying to be faithful to Jesus in the midst of a world that has other gods, both in the sense of gods that they worship, as well as some of the same gods we worship today, like money and power and other things. And so they're facing challenges because of that. But we're also seeing they're facing other challenges, not just from Rome and their worship of the emperor and their gods, but they're also facing challenges. The Jews in some areas are still causing challenges for them. And what's interesting is, again, depending on the historical setting that you put the book of Revelation in, I think it probably was written in the mid-90s of the first century. And so if you think about that, what's happened over 20 years before that?
Jerusalem.
The destruction of Jerusalem. And after that period, you saw actually a lot of Jews that became Christians because they started seeing the truth of Jesus' prophecies about the destruction of Jerusalem and some other things. And yet, still, there are some that are trying to push the Christians out, still trying to persecute Christians. So they're facing all of these different challenges, and you can imagine the question on the Christian's mind is, where is God in all of this? And even some of the things that happen for us today, we may ask the same question. Where is God in all of this? What happened to his plan? What happened to, we talk about Jesus as king. We talk about reigning with Jesus, and some of that language is here in this book, but you're looking out into the world and you're seeing a very worldly, evil person sitting on the throne of the world empire. You're seeing people rise up and Christians suffering because they won't give in to worshiping other gods. And you think, God, what's going on? And so it begins by this amazing vision of Jesus to remind us of his power, and then moves into chapters 2 and 3 where he's writing these letters. Jesus is giving these letters to the 7 churches that are kind of in the core of this at this point in time. And he said, reminds them, I am the one who was dead and now alive. I am the one who holds the 7 stars. I am the one with the burning flame of fire in my eyes. I am the one who has the sword coming out of. I am the king. And yet the messages of these letters to the 7 churches isn't simply, don't worry about it, I got this. That's part of the message. But really the main message of these letters is, be faithful. You're going to have to trust me. You're going to have to repent of sin. And you're going to have to hold on to me through all of this. And then you will see. And that's always been the message. If you think of some of the repeated phrases that you hear in the book of Psalms, and the Psalms were often written by David during challenging times, and others, Asaph, during challenging times, what's some of the repeated phrases that you remember from the book of Psalms? His steadfast love endures forever. Do you have to sing that and remind yourself of that when everything is nice and wonderful? No, I need to sing that. I think it's Psalm 118 maybe, or maybe it's 18. Get confused, but one of those Psalms, it just like repeats that, like every other line. His steadfast love endures forever. His steadfast love endures forever. His loving kindness endures forever. Why do you have to do that? Because when everything around me feels chaos and everything around me feels like it's falling apart, I need to repeat that to myself and say, his steadfast love endures forever. I need to get together with God's people and sing that song together. His steadfast love endures forever in the midst of the assembly. And so that's part of the message here. Another one is, what do I have to do? What's my responsibility during those times? Trust. And sometimes that's phrased as wait on the Lord. That's what wait on the Lord means. Doesn't mean just sit back and just see what's going to happen. It means wait in trust. Keep doing the right things. Keep holding to the promises. Keep believing in the midst of all of this. And wait on the Lord is a powerful message in the book of Revelation. And that's what he's saying to these churches as well. And so we're looking at these messages to the churches. We were in the middle of the message to the church at Sardis in chapter 3, verses 1 through 6. Remember, they have a name that they're alive, but they're dead. People know about the church at Sardis. They're great. They've got a name that they're alive. But Jesus said you're dead. What matters? What other people think or what Jesus thinks? You know it's a rhetorical question, but at the same time, we need to answer that question, and we need to remind ourselves of the question. Because again, we're here to apply these messages to us as Christians and to us as the Church of Christ in Manchester. What does it matter what people in Alabama think about the church in Manchester? What does it matter what the people in New York think about the church at Manchester? Doesn't matter. What does it matter to the people in Nashville or Murfreesboro or anybody else right around us? Ultimately, it doesn't matter what they think. What matters is that Jesus says, you're faithful to me and you're alive and you're doing the right things. Because lots of people have opinions on what the right thing is to do. But as Terrell preached to us this morning, we go back to the Word and we say, what does Jesus say here? And that's how Jesus tells us we're alive, we're faithful, we're doing the right things. So you have a name, they're alive, but you're dead. Wake up. Strengthen the things that remain. Remember what you have received and heard and keep it, he says. And then when you look at verses 4 through 6, what does he say about this church that's has a name that's alive, but they're really dead? Who else is there?
There's some that are faithful.
But you have a few people in Sardis who have not soiled their garments. What does that tell you about the relationship of the individual Christian to the church as the local church?
We will not be judged as a congregation.
Okay. And that goes both ways, right? I'm not going to be saved because the Manchester church did some good things and was faithful. And I'm not going to be condemned because the Manchester church wasn't faithful in some things. I'm going to be judged, as Jesus says, based on my faith and my works. So they had a few there who, in the midst of this church and this challenging environment, they had people that were remaining faithful. What are some other things that you get from that, of being in that situation? It's a suffering environment and a church that's not being faithful to Jesus, and you're one of the members there. What does verses 4 through 6 tell you?
There were some that were remaining faithful even with the hardship, even with the difficulties of dealing with others that were not faithful.
Okay.
But compared to today,
So the first thing I picked up on you said is that when you have a church where there's lots of people not doing the right things, and it seems over the majority of the church is not doing the right things, it brings difficulty. It brings challenges because, as Terrell was preaching, we're supposed to have this relationship of fellowship, that we're standing together, that we're working for Jesus together. But when you have a church that's not being faithful to Jesus, it brings challenges because now we've got problems. We're not as connected as we need to be. We don't feel connected as we need to be. But he doesn't say, you have a few people that are faithful, and I'm telling them to get out and go start their own church on the other side of Sardis. And yet, when you go to many communities here, even this community here, what's the history? Brother so-and-so is mad at brother so-and-so, and so they leave and start a church on the other side of town. I mean, and most of the time, at least the stories that I've heard, most of the time, it's not even to the level of what's being described here. Now, Paul said in another place, sometimes division is necessary, right? Jesus talked about sometimes when, even in his own mission, he came, and what was it going to do? It was going to cause division, even with people within their own households, because people are making a choice of being faithful. So I'm not saying there's never a situation where, you just stay at a church, doesn't matter how sinful, doesn't matter how far away they get from the Bible, you just stay there. It's not what we're saying. But I think, and Steve, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the reason we want to bring up this other aspect is because so much of our history is about dividing over much lesser things. Sure.
We don't always know. The Holy Spirit told John these things, so this was, from God, but we don't always know. We can be in a church, and there can be several people just not living right.
Right.
Hiding their sin. We don't know those things, and we can't answer for those things. And so I think of it kind of like that as well. There's a lot of things we don't know about each other. I mean, hopefully we don't have things like that, but that there could be things. So you couldn't be held accountable
Right.
if your brother is living in a way that you don't even know about.
Right. Yeah. I think, so there are things that we don't even know that could be going on. And maybe sometimes another issue is we assume some things when we shouldn't assume, and it can cause that. But the main message he has here is, I have a few people that are faithful, they haven't soiled their garments, and they will walk with me. And so you've got to overcome. He who overcomes, in verse 5, will thus be clothed in white garments, and I won't erase his name. And he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Anything else about verses 1 through 6? Sam.
What you just said, to me, as I read it, I'm inferring that if you're not living right, you can have your name blotted out of the book,
Yeah.
even though he only looks at it from the one side. So I need to be careful and heed the warnings,
Yeah, absolutely.
because I don't want to lose that. I don't want to be blotted out because I'm the one that just didn't want to live right.
Yeah, absolutely. If I will not erase your name, the implication is your name can be erased. It can be blotted out. And it's if you're soiling your garments or not, if you're being faithful or not, Joe.
Such a good comment. And verse 1, he's holding the 7 stars.
Yeah.
Those ones that shine out brightly, he's holding those. And he hadn't forgotten.
That's right.
And then he is the one who has the 7 spirits. These
Right.
are livening spirits. So if you're dead,
Right.
I know it can help.
And when he says wake up and strengthen the things that remain, if all of the ones that are not soiling their garments go, who's going to do that?
That's the idea.
So he says in verse 2, wake up and strengthen the things that remain which were about to die. If the ones he talks about later, the ones who are not soiling their garments, if they say, okay, well, they're soiling their garments, I'm not, so I'm leaving, who's gonna do verse 2? Now, the ones who have soiled their garments have a responsibility to wake up and all of that. But a lot of times it's good, faithful people in the midst of people being unfaithful that are willing to stand up and say, look, brothers and sisters, we've got to turn this around. We've got to do what's right, and we've got to be faithful to Jesus, and you need to be a part of that. You need to change yourself. And so the message is to all of them, but I would say it's those people that haven't soiled their garments that have a great opportunity here and a responsibility to stand up and call on their other brothers and sisters to turn this around. Any other thoughts? Okay. Chapter 3 and verse 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, he who is holy, who is true, and who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, and who shuts and no one opens, says this: I know your deeds. Behold, I have put before you an open door, which no one can shut, because you have a little power. And I have kept my word and have not denied my name. Behold, I will cause those of the synagogue of Satan, who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. I will make them come and bow down at your feet and make them know that I have loved you, because you have kept the word of my perseverance. I also will keep you from the hour of testing, that hour which is about to come upon the whole world to test those who dwell on the earth. I am coming quickly. Hold fast what you have, so that no one will take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he will not go out from it anymore. And I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God, and my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And so what's the overwhelming message you get for the church at Philadelphia here? I'm sorry?
Doing a good job.
They're doing a good job. What do you notice is missing from this section that's present in most of the others? Yeah, there's only 2 churches out of these 7 where he has no rebukes for them. And this is one of them. You're doing the right deeds, works. He says you have how much power? A little. It reminds me of something that Jesus said. If you have a little what? Faith. A little faith, you can do what? You can move mountains. Is a little faith little in the eyes of God?
A little faith plus God.
Yes. Yeah. It's faith in him, in what he can do through you. Is that little to God? And I think when he says you have a little power, maybe talking about what other people are saying about them. You're nothing. Your God's nothing. Your God's small. Our God's the one who's sitting on the throne of the world empire. Your God's nothing. And Jesus is saying, you've got a little power. And with that, you can do a whole lot. Because they have, he says, because you have a little power, but what comes before that? Because they have a little power, what do they have? What's before them?
The door that Christ has opened.
Yeah, an open door. And what can, you know me, I'm bad about forming questions. What can no one else do with that door? No one else can shut it. Doesn't matter how hard they try to slam it. Doesn't matter how many people they get trying to push that door closed. No one can shut it. Why?
Verse 7, Christ is the key.
Christ
He's
is the
opening
key.
doors, he's closing doors,
Yeah.
hang in there with him.
The key of who?
David,
The key of David. Who's David?
we don't know.
Okay, who was the original David? How about that? Who's David?
The king of Israel.
The king of Israel, the greatest king of Israel, and who is used as a type for the Messiah, right? You know, the prophecies of Jesus talk about the branch of Jesse, talk about the son of Jesse, you know, the promises that were given to David, and eventually his kingdom is going to last forever. So it's the eternal kingdom. And what did David in history do for Israel?
He made it a great nation, I think.
Yeah. Joshua came in and helped them to conquer the land. They got a king, Saul. He did a few things, but things started really to fall apart under him. David became king, and he helped them to conquer all the rest of the land, to fulfill other of God's promises to Israel. And they always looked back on that as the greatest time in the history of Israel. Because who was David? How does God describe him? A man after my own heart. And so God was with him. And God enabled him to do things that didn't make sense for little Israel to be able to do. But God worked through David to do that. Jesus is the son of David. Jesus has the key. And the rest of the world is saying, the emperor has the key. We're the ones that have the power. You better get on the side of Rome if you want things to work out for you. And guess what? People of power, men of power today do the same thing. You better follow us. You better believe the things we can do. And it takes different forms today. Sometimes it's presidents. Sometimes it's kings and leaders of nations. Sometimes it's people who are controlling TV networks. Sometimes it's actors and actresses. Sometimes it's politicians. And sometimes it's other people that the world gives power to. And they say, you better follow us or we're going to make life painful for you. And the message to us is, there's only one person who has the key to life and the true power, and it's Jesus. And all of those kings of the past fell apart, and all of these leaders and people of power today are just going to fall. Only Jesus has the key. Only Jesus can give true power if you follow in the steps of the church at Philadelphia. And why did they have a little power? What were they doing? They kept his word and did not deny his name. In a world of darkness, that's what we need to do. Keep his word and do not deny his name. Now, let me ask you a little more about this open door that he puts in front of them. Can you remember any other passages that talk about open doors?
Revelation.
Okay.
He's at the door, he's knocking.
Yeah. He's at the door, he's knocking.
Open up.
Yeah. And he wants you to open. And that's in your relationship to him. What about other parts of Scripture?
Paul said that the Lord had opened up a door for them.
Yeah. There's lots of passages. We don't have time. I can give you a list of them. But in Acts, in 1 Corinthians, in 2 Corinthians, and Colossians, they talk about open doors. And each time it is an open door for what? The gospel, for evangelism. Now let me ask you. In an environment where people are suffering because they won't worship the emperor, in an environment where people are worshiping other gods, an environment where you may not be able to go and buy food for your family if you follow this, how in the world is there going to be an open door? Doesn't sound very promising to me. How's it going to happen? Who can open a door in those circumstances? Jesus can. One of the things, been reading a book on parenting, and one of the things that really hit me is he was talking about raising children to follow God. And he said one of the things that Christians are always told not to be is afraid. And yet sometimes the way we talk as Christians, and maybe sometimes the way that we guide our children, is that they should be afraid. And this has to be applied right. And like I said, I'm just thinking about this, trying to figure out how to apply it myself as a Christian and father. But sometimes the way that we talk about things that are going on in politics and morality in the world and things that might happen at school and all of these things, it's almost as if we talk about them as, make sure you just kind of go out and then come right back and run into your room and hide. You got to go. Jesus can open doors in a community, in a world where people think of sexuality absolutely against the ways that God talks about sexuality. Jesus can open doors in a world where people can't talk to one another about differing opinions without pulling out a gun. Jesus can open doors in all of these circumstances that we get so scared of sometimes, and yet he's the King of Kings. Sam?
We're not very good light if we hide it under a bed, or like that song we teach the kids, hide it under a bushel. We're supposed to put it on a lampstand, and Jesus mentioned that in the Sermon on the Mount.
Right.
So, we can't influence everyone if we're the salt and we keep ourselves inside the bottle.
Right.
That's got to be spread.
Yeah.
Now, we can do it carefully and smartly. We don't want to be out there purposefully irritating and
Right.
aggravating people, because I've never known anyone in my life that was aggravated by somebody trying to just beat them over the head with it. You're going to go to hell. You're going to go.
Yeah.
I've really never known anyone who just thought, oh man, I guess I really want to know what you have to say. No, they get put off by it.
Right.
So there's a way, we don't have to just be an irritation to people.
Right.
But if people see that love, I think that comes across a lot better. They realize they care about me.
Yeah.
They're willing to take a chance and ask me questions or share this with me. And so, yeah, I'm going to give them a minute and see what's going on with that.
If I had to pick two things that I saw consistently in Jesus and his followers in the New Testament, it was one, wherever they went, his love, their love for God was very clear in who they were. And the second thing was, they weren't afraid to talk to anybody. Doesn't matter if this group over here said, don't talk to that woman if you only knew who she was like. Or that group of people and their color of skin, their background, whatever, don't talk to them. Or that person, if you knew the kind of lifestyle he lived. Jesus just went in the love of his Father and did his Father's will and would talk to anybody. And that's what his disciples went out and did too. And sometimes the strangest of people were converted to Jesus because of that. Rulers of synagogues were all of a sudden faithful Christians. Roman soldiers were all of a sudden faithful Christians. It's beautiful, the power of God through simple things. Rufus?
Well, you just touched on one item, and that is that you got to kind of put yourself out there. You got to be the light on the candle, and be able to be available. Maybe that's a real simplistic way to think of it, about it. Be available to talk, be able to. But the other part of that I see as the open door is that you don't know those people's heart.
Yeah.
God knows.
Right.
And if you're there, they may be searching. They may be just as hard on the surface as anyone that you would ever want or not want
is some people that you just hear their words, and you maybe look at some of the evidence of their life, and you think, well, they're hard-hearted, worldly, and hateful. There's no chance. And exactly your point, maybe they're that way because nobody gave them a chance to hear the gospel. Nobody gave them a chance to find out what the love of Jesus could do in their life. And so Jesus tells this church in the midst of a very difficult situation, you have an open door. I have put it before you, and nobody can shut it. And we need to believe that that can happen in our environment just the same as it did for them. What else through verse 13 catches your attention?
When he says take your crown, what do you where that?
Yeah, I mean, he talks about in other places, I'm going to give you the crown of life. And only the true king is the one that can give someone else that power. And so it's your crown is your relationship with Jesus, your reward with Jesus. He says, hold fast what you have in verse 11 so that no one will take your crown. So what's interesting is he says no one, other people can impact you in such a way to take your crown. But it's not like I can't come up to Vaughn and I can't just take his crown. I can't take his relationship with Jesus. What does Vaughn first have to do?
He has to let go in verse 11. He doesn't hold fast.
Exactly. He says, hold fast what you have so that no one can take your crown. The point of that is, if you hold fast to Jesus, it's what he said Jesus said himself, no one can do what? No one can snatch you out of my hand. No one. No one can take you from Jesus. You are safe. It doesn't matter. Guess what? Can someone kill you? Absolutely. Can they snatch you out of Jesus' hand when they do it? Absolutely not. And they could do all number of things to you, but they cannot snatch you out of Jesus' hand. But you can give them the power to take you away from Jesus. You can give them that by not holding fast to Jesus. If you hold fast to him, he will hold fast to you and will not let you go. Yep.
Another thing, topic on the door, Christ said he was the door. He was the door, and he is the way,
Yeah.
truth, and life. So that door is open from him, and also that verse says that we have pasture, we have green pasture to come in and go.
That's right. Yeah. Jesus, I'm the door. You want the way to life, the way to the things that you want? It's through me. I'm the one that can give you what you want. I'm the path to God. No one else. And so, to him who overcomes, I'm going to make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and write on him the name of my God. What does a pillar do in a building? It's a support. It's an important part of the support, right? I'm going to make you a pillar in the temple of God, and you're not going to go out. And what's the temple in the New Testament? Christians, the church, is the temple of God and the new Jerusalem. You are the city of God. You are God's people. And God's going to keep you there. And he's going to write his name on you. He's going to own you. And when a king owns something, what does he do to those things? Maybe I should ask it this way. What does he do when those things are threatened that he owns? He defends them. You're my people. You're my temple. You're my city. I'm going to defend you. And that's what the king is coming to do. If you hold fast. All right. Well, we will finish. furnish the last church. Not on Wednesday, because our meeting starts on Wednesday, so it will be on Sunday. Our meeting will go through Sunday, but we'll still have the Bible class.